Michio was useless filth who lived a meaningless, aimless existence until he got transported into another realm. There he became a warrior to conquer perilous dungeons and form the most formidable harem. So he goes to the underground market and purchases peculiar girls who will do anything to obey him. Hey warriors, how is it going? You see me, I am Itachi Uchiha, the hidden Hokage of Leaf Village. Just kidding, you know I am just an AI, but behind this shape, I am here to entertain you with enormous, amazing recaps of all animes you can imagine. So without talking too much, let's dive in our story. It all begins when Michio wakes up inside a stable. When he sees the game interface, he thinks the VR is just incredibly lifelike, even replicating the way he was attired. He then spots some slippers and puts them on, which grants him the level 1 rogue class by mistake. Next, he discovers his bonus blade hidden under some straw and is thrilled to see that the sword has exceptional attributes. Now that he's armed, Michio dashes out to see what awaits him in the simulation. Outside, Michio hears some ruckus and sees the peasants uniting to protect against approaching raiders. He wonders if the locals will be safe, especially since the raiders' boss has a superior rank and a unique thief scarf. The clash begins and the villagers are entirely overpowered. However, since the chief is preoccupied, Michio concludes it's the ideal moment for a surprise strike, so he charges up and gives him the Ned Stark treatment. Another thug lunges to strike him, but Michio swiftly knocks away his blade and overpowers him. Just then, the rest of the thugs dash to flee, but Michio races after them and butchers them until he's winded. After, he checks his interface and sees his rank has increased to level 2, and he's earned a new role as a champion. An elderly man approaches and introduces himself as the village elder Samara. He then welcomes him back to his dwelling to express gratitude for shielding their town. Back at the hamlet, Samara reveals to Michio a chamber full of combat loot and tells him they'll all be his after they've taken their portion. Michio then notices the thief scarf but observes it's been replaced with a counterfeit. He accuses Samara, who pledges to investigate it while he prepares a rune for Michio to rest. When Michio enters to relax, he suddenly ponders how to exit the game. He tries all the command phrases he can recall, but a system notice alerts him that he can't return to the real world. He then recalls the alert that he wouldn't be able to go back and realizes he doomed himself by his own decision. Just then, Samara returned with some water to rinse off and a fresh set of garments. However, it finally dawns on Michio that if the simulation is his new existence, he just nonchalantly slaughtered a group of humans. Samara tells him to notify him once he's done dressing and departs. When he's by himself, Michio begins to spiral, thinking he's no better than Joffrey now, but he understands that it's common for raiders to raid townsfolk in this realm. If he loses his resolve, he'll be an easy target, so he's relieved this happened early on. He then takes his gear and resolves to thrive in this new reality. That night, Samara presents the man who stole the thief's scarf, and he turns out to be one of the townspeople. When Michio verifies the real scarf, Samara asks how he wishes to discipline the man. Michio then tells him to follow his people's customs, which makes Samara disheartened. He turns to the man and invokes a spell to alter his knowledge card. Michio asks what's occurring, so Samara clarifies that he just changed the man's designation to a servant. In their town, individuals caught robbing are sold off as servants, and half the earnings of the trade is given to the target, while the other half goes to their household who lost a helper. Michio then realizes Samara wanted him to be merciful so this wouldn't occur, but it was too late now. After, Samara gives Michio the knowledge cards of the raiders and explains that some might have a bounty on their name. He then guides him to a night post in the city of Bali where he can redeem his prizes. It would also be the ideal spot to sell his combat spoils. So Samara proposes to ready a wagon for him the next morning. The next day, Michio arrives at the city of Bali, which is crowded with people who gathered for market day. After, he proceeds to the night post where a woman as hideous as her demeanor tells him 2 of the raiders had rewards on their name. However, when they ask to view his knowledge card before he gets money, Michio hopes his performance anxieties didn't follow him into the realm. Thankfully, his knowledge card pops out, so the sour woman throws his cash and tells him to scram. When Michio leaves, he realizes the city's lively spirit seems to have vanished, so the cart driver warns him that there are risky districts and shady brothels around. When Michio hears this, his thoughts race, visualizing indecent fantasies. Before he realizes it, he arrives at the servant merchant's mansion. Inside, the lord of the house, Alan, comes out to welcome them, explaining that he had many visitors because a maze was uncovered near the city 2 days ago. When he inquired about the servant, they present a note from Samara detailing the issue. Alan is impressed that Michio managed to overcome so many raiders, but Michio brushes him off, saying they were merely feeble. Alan then proposes 30,000 nars in return for the fool who gambled his life to steal a scarf. Afterward, Michio hands over the villagers' share of the funds, and the cart driver returns to the hamlet. However, Michio soon realizes realizes he doesn't know anyone or anything about this realm and is practically a stranger. Suddenly, Alan returns and asks if he might borrow a bit more of his time. They head back inside, and Michio realizes they're now in a more luxurious-looking place and wonders what he's planning. Alan suggests that since Michio is an adventurer, he should acquire some servants. Michio is conflicted about the notion until Alan clarifies that his enterprise specializes specifically in servants who let you get intimate with them. As Michio's trousers tighten, he composes himself when a maid arrives to offer him tea. Just then, Michio sees the maid with jiggle physics that could bring Einstein to collapse. Alan immediately identifies a fellow enthusiast of culture. So when Roxanne steps away, he asks Michio if he likes what he observes. Alan gets straight to the point and tells him she's their top-rated servant. Embarrassed, Michio asks if a servant could betray their owner, so Alan explains that the servants perish when their owners die, and if they escape, they automatically become criminals. He then adds that Roxanne is a wolfskin and beast warrior, which implies she's incredibly capable in a labyrinth. However, he elaborates that the main advantage of her being a wolfskin is that humans and non-humans cannot reproduce, meaning no bothersome protection is required. Alan assures him that she has granted her permission to be bent like a glow stick, which means Michio can toss his conscience away. Michio struggles with the decision of becoming a sleaze, but when he realizes someone else would sleep with and dominate her if he doesn't, he asks Alan how much he's considering. Alan tells him she costs over 400,000 nars, but Michio admits that he's too poor to manage it. When Alan sees him out, Michio lays eyes on Roxanne again, so Alan whispers like a tempter, telling him he can wait 5 days for him to gather the funds. He then tells Roxanne that Michio has taken an interest in her, so she thanks him for his attention. When Alan departs the trading estate, he resolves to do whatever is necessary to obtain Roxanne. After, Michio heads to a diner where he counts all the currency he has and realizes he's 70,000 nars short. He then remembers Alan's suggestion to earn cash by heading to the labyrinth that emerged 2 days earlier. Adventurers earn money by selling the goods they collect from defeating monsters. However, when warned that it would be tough to gather a large amount of wealth in a brief period, Michio realized the quicker path would be to claim bounties. Alan concurred, but said he wouldn't suggest it because if he attracted notice, he'd become the prey instead. In the present, Michio figures that since he has 5 days to get Roxanne, he'll attempt the dependable method first and head to the labyrinth. However, he realizes his weapon is so powerful that others might try to snatch it. If it gets stolen, he'll be doomed, but not in an amusing way. Michio then decides to reset the character and conceal the blade away. Next, he heads to the bazaar to purchase a fitting weapon to replace his primary blade. At the weapon shop, he sees a pile of swords and notices one with an empty skill slot, which means he can assign skills to it later. When the shopkeeper tells him the swords are all the same price, Michio opts for the empty slot sword and asks to get protective gear too. After suiting up, Michio proceeds into the woods to locate the entrance of the labyrinth. There, he sees a party of adventurers pass through a portal and notices one of the men is a mage. After trailing them, he discovers the gate of the labyrinth and watches them pass through. With this, he re-equips his primary sword and enters the labyrinth too. Michio lands on the first level of the labyrinth, which is dimly lit and surprisingly orderly. He then checks his status and sees he's now a level 1 explorer with new abilities. Michio realizes that if he earned the thief status by stealing slippers, he must have become an explorer by entering the labyrinth. He then observes the hero status and selects it as his secondary role, then explorer as his tertiary. Next, he tests the dungeon walk, and when he steps through, he ends up in the room he was previously in. However, when he tries to exit, it doesn't succeed, and he realizes he can only utilize it within the labyrinth. When he attempts to return to his prior location and is denied, he understands the destinations are restricted in the labyrinth too. As he moves forward, he complains how much the ordeal sucks when he notices I Am Groot approaching. Michio then opts to test his strength against it and is amazed when he defeats it in one blow, thinking it must be due to his massive weapon. He then spots a branch left behind by the creature and saves it for later. Before long, another beast approaches, which reminds Michio that his hero role also had a skill titled Overwhelming. When he triggers it, the creature's actions slow down, but when he prepares to strike it, he suddenly loses the drive to battle and would rather wrap himself in Roxanne's embrace. Suddenly, the creature lunges, but Michio manages to overcome it. Then he realizes he felt the same desire to be a slacker after using Dungeon Walk earlier. He deduces that draining his MP by using spells dampens him. However, thanks to his sword's MP absorption, he was able to stabilize. He then opts to refrain from using spells until he gains more MP. That night, Michio goes to a guild to trade the branches, but this only earns him 273 nars. When he gets back to the inn, he realizes each branch is worth 10 nars, which means even if he worked 10 hours, he'd only make 1,000 nars, which isn't sufficient to get Roxen. The next day, Michio heads out early, but it's so dim he can't see where he's standing. However, he recalls one of his bonus chances, teleport, so he uses it to warp to the first floor of the labyrinth. Mikio celebrates briefly, but suddenly begins scolding himself for coming to a perilous location. He realizes he's thinking dark thoughts again and calls his sword so he can swiftly beat an enemy and refill his MP after Michio fends off beasts repeatedly, but realizes he doesn't have endless stamina and can't continue. On the plus side, his stats for all his jobs have grown, so he chooses to descend into a deeper part of the dungeon. Suddenly, a stone behind him shifts out of alignment and he uncovers a hidden room. He assumes there might be treasure stored inside and quickly crawls in, but he soon realizes it's actually a beast's lair. As he retreats from the creatures, one of them sneaks up behind him and attempts to strike. He manages to conquer it, but ends up getting flung aside by another Groot. Mikio recognizes that he'll perish if he keeps taking hits like that, so he plans to flee, but the dungeon walk fails to respond. Trapped by his own tool, Mikio has no option but to battle, hoping to compensate for his health drop with his sword HP absorption skill. He then uses overwhelming to hinder the beasts as he slices through them, but this reduces his MP severely. Mikio concludes that since this is his current reality, dying here would be the finish, so he decides to give everything he's got. Unexpectedly, the runt manages to conquer all the beasts and gather their solid wood. He then exits the hidden room, grateful for his weapon's ability to recharge so he can go several rounds. After Michio exits the labyrinth looking like a worn sock, he notices people gathering at the castle entrance and asks what happened. One of the men tells him they found the remains of a criminal who used to linger in town. However, due to the knight's involvement or competing groups, the criminals shifted their base and began attacking nearby towns. Mikio instantly remembers the criminals he had eliminated and wonders if these may be remnants seeking vengeance on him, but he figures they must be aiming for revenge on whoever drove them out of town to begin with. Mikio then asks how they know it was a criminal, so the men indicate that his left hand has been chopped off so they could steal his identity card. At this, Michio realizes they must have been after the bounty and walks away. He realizes the labyrinth is likely a lost route and chooses a quicker route to Roxanne's bed by targeting criminals. Later, Michio sits to strategize how to track down the criminals. Unlike the last time, he won't be hitting distracted targets, so he wonders if he's capable enough to handle it. He opens his job menu, which now includes warrior, swordsman, and merchant jobs. When he inspects the warrior ability, he sees it has stronger traits than villager, but given his new task, he chooses to use explorer, hero, and thief. The next day, Michio strolls around town trying to spot any criminals, but everyone at the bazaar checks out. Suddenly, Michio overhears some guys who say the criminals who are dying are the ones who were driven from the slums. Mikio then recalls when the cart driver told him about the shady spots in the region, so he heads to a dim alley to trigger his teleportation. Moments later, he lands in the slums, which happen to smell like waste. The place is full of underfed misfits and hopeless folks with empty pockets just like yours. But he doesn't see any criminals. When the stench of the slums nearly makes him lose his breakfast, Michio activates teleportation and bolts for his life. Back at the inn, Michio cleans up and realizes he no longer feels gloomy from multiple uses of the teleport. He concludes it's because of the levels he earned from the creature battle, which means he should be ready to face any criminal. That night, Michio cloaks up and hands his key to the innkeeper, who then offers him a lantern. Outside, Michio was glad he borrowed a light source, even if it only lights up the area near his feet. He then uses identification to examine the people standing around, but they all turn out to be townsfolk who are probably deceiving their partners. Michio is about to quit when he sees the pink glow of depravity and realizes it's the street with the brothel. As Michio strolls through the street, he dodges the actual street hoses that appear like the ones on your screen when you visit a shady site. Just then, he spots a follicle-resistant muscular guy chatting up one of the workers and discovers he's a criminal. The man departs and Michio trails him toward the slums. When they arrive, he finds a gang of other outlaws and assumes it must be their hideout. He teleports closer to the group and hears one of them mention Ugo. Michio then recalls that the thug he decapitated was named Ugo, which means the man is either one of the criminals that was driven out of town or a companion of Ugo. By the next morning, Michio learns that the shops in the red light zone shut early, after which the bandits come out to roam. They seem to have their own crews and zones, and they avoid dealing with one another entirely. As Michio stared at the criminal from the night prior, he figured that must be his domain, so if he targeted his crew, the other teams wouldn't raise a fuss. When Michio gets back to the inn, the host praises him for working hard and gives him some food for free. As they converse, the keeper says that the tales of a power dispute between the thugs that reside in the slums is all nonsense. He explains that after a leadership contest, the defeated group was expelled from town, but the ones who were found slain were the group who won the leadership conflict and remained in town. So whoever is hunting them is merely making it seem like it was the doing of the exiled group. That night, Michio lies in bed, daydreaming about visiting Roxanne's dairy shop while his left hand travels to his southern hemisphere. The next night, Michio gets ready to head out with the rogue's bandana and his blade. He returns to the slums, and this time he walks up to the guard and shows him the thief's bandana. Then he offers him 1 gold coin in return for knowledge about Ugo. The man states that Ugo was already gone, but when Michio asks for more details, the man tells him to wait outside. When he steps in, Michio notices where his companions must be hidden and takes note. When the man returns, he informs Michio that his boss is sleeping and advises him to wait till he gets up, so he invites him inside to chat. When they reach a chamber, the man notices Michio's dull sword and confidently lets him enter. Inside, he asks to confirm if the bandana is a true rogue's bandana, so Michio tries to bring it out when the criminal suddenly strikes. After failing, the thug discloses that Ugo was originally supposed to take over the leadership, but was expelled by the rival groups. The man then tells Michio not to try escaping as he intends to take the bandana for himself and pawn it. However, Michio reveals that it was his strategy all along and drops the bandana onto the candle. When the room dims, Michio drives his sword into the bandit and finishes him. He then removes his hand to access his data card. Next, Michio creeps into the room with the companions and sees they're all robbers. There, he covers the head of a bandit and slashes his throat swiftly so he doesn't awaken, then severs his hand. However, when he decapitates the next target, he makes a sound that alerts a female bandit, so he takes her out from the flank. The last remaining outlaw grabs a blade and begins slashing, so Michio teleports out of the room to wait for him to dash for assistance. When the door opens, he pierces the big guy and chops off his hand, but when he hears a stir outside, he assumes the others must have caught on. He opts to fall back with the 3 hands and teleports to the maze. In the labyrinth, Michio reflects on what a scumbag he is, but figures it must be the MP Drain speaking. When he leaves the maze, he begins collecting the data cards, but is plagued by the images of the criminals he dispatched. However, Michio persuades himself that the laws are different in this realm and that he has no alternative. Later in his room, Michio fears that if he keeps redeeming rewards one after another, he might draw the eyes of the knights. But if he travels to another town to redeem it, it might raise suspicions that he left town to collect the prize. Irritated, Michio opts to focus on Roxanne instead and dozes off. The next morning, Michio waits at the night station till he spots the knight that was present when he claimed his initial bounty. He tells the knight he was ambushed by criminals, but managed to beat them. So, the man checks his data card and approves him for the payment. The knight goes in to verify the cards, and when he returns, he tells him only 2 had rewards on their heads and gives him the cash. Michio leaves to count the money and is thrilled that he finally has enough to purchase Roxanne. He promptly heads to see Alan to bring the cash and heads inside to fetch Roxanne. When he returns with them, Roxanne thanks him for purchasing her and says sorry for doubting he would come back. Michio assures her it's fine, and she walks over to stand by him. Alan then requests their data card and establishes a pact, making them servant and master. Alan then congratulates Michio on finally acquiring the girl of his steamy fantasies. Afterward, they head back to the inn, and Michio asks for a room for 2. When they inspect the room, Michio observes how uneasy Roxanne seems to be, so he asks if he may touch her ears. Roxanne agrees and sits beside him, while Michio struggles hard to restrain his impulses as he squeezes her springy ears. When Michio observes there's only 1 bed in the room, he realizes his host is a legendary wingman, but that must be why Roxanne is anxious. He then tells Roxanne that his native land is very distant, so he'd need her aid learning what's considered usual around that region. He reminds her that she'll be accompanying him into the labyrinth, so Roxanne assures him she's highly skilled with lengthy tools. After Roxanne begins to unpack when Michio sees she isn't wearing any footwear. When she tells him she's been barefoot the entire time, Michio realizes he's been staring at just in part of her figure. He then gives her a pair of sandals, and when she slips them on, it adjusts to her size. She explains that the gear is built to fit the wearer and promises to cherish her present. Later, they head to the market to purchase some defense gear. Roxanne asks for a timber shield, so they go to a shop, and Michio assists her in selecting shields with vacant skill slots. They then choose some more gear and exit the store. Next, Michio opts to purchase a fresh cloak since the previous one got ruined with blood. He tells Roxanne to pick one she prefers, so she pulls out 2 options and asks Michio which he likes more. Michio thinks this must be a trick and cautiously selects one, but Roxanne was only only torn between color and texture. Mikio asks if there's anything else she requires, reminding her it's a special day, so Roxanne gets bashful and says she'll need some new underwear. When she mentions she only has the one she's wearing, Michio advises her to get 2 extras. After acquiring all the gear they need, Michio proposes they return to the inn. When they arrive, Michio tells Roxanne to take a seat, but she goes directly for the floor. Michio then lifts her onto the bed and tells her not to worry, since she'll be using it too. When he imagines them sleeping together, he gets aroused and grabs her hips. But Roxanne jumps up like your morning wood and suggests she service the equipment first. She pulls out the sword to inspect it, and though she says it's acceptable, she reminds him that he should properly upkeep something he entrusts his life to. Roxanne tells him she wants to use her old undergarments as cloths for the cleaning, so she suggests he go out to eat while she handles it. However, Michio insists they eat together, so Roxanne begins to remove her garments to take off her underwear. Michio tries to give her some privacy, but the perv can't help but peek. When she's finished, she begins to oil his tool with olive oil, and when Michio asks what the advantage is, she assures him it feels smoother. Just then, the host brings up heated bathwater for 2, so Michio tries to hide his thrill, as he knows some clothes are coming off. Roxanne begins scrubbing his back, while Michio attempts to make small talk to ease her nerves. When she's done, Michio tells her it's her turn, so Roxanne takes off her top, and Michio nearly has a heart failure when he sees the size of her launch-ready assets. Michio begins with her back, but when he can't resist anymore, he strikes her front lines. Then he goes back to being pure when he offers to wash her hair. When she returns the gesture, the view of her mountain peaks almost drives him insane, so he plans to escalate things. Roxanne sees the hunger in his eyes, so she rushes back and offers to wear her maid costume, making Michio wonder what Alan must have shown her. He then tells her to ditch the costume along with the rest of her clothes. Roxanne complies and joins him on the bed, so Michio kisses her for the first time. He then tells her to kiss him first thing in the morning and last thing at night. When she agrees, Michio proceeds to remove his virgin tag. The next morning, Roxanne kisses Michio awake, stirring his sleeping soldier. Unfortunately, Michio decides to save the energy for later and recommends they proceed to the labyrinth. As they prepare, Michio asks how he can enhance his weapons with powers, so Roxanne asks if he's speaking of ability crystals, which are formed through the collection of creature skills. The crystals can then be merged with gear based on the skills in the blacksmith. Michio asks how he can become one, so Roxanne says it's a talent exclusive to dwarves, so he can't be one. When Michio asks about hiring a blacksmith, Roxanne says she doesn't support it since many shady blacksmiths exist and they dislike direct exchanges. When Roxanne finishes dressing, Michio gives her some hide armor, but when the armor highlights all of her features, they decide to swap armors. Michio then activates group setup and adds her to his crew. When they move into town, Michio pulls Roxanne into an alley where he activates his teleportation and brings her through. He then informs her they're on the first level of a labyrinth via teleportation magic. When Roxanne says she's never heard of such a thing, Michio tells her not to mention it since few people can use it. When they delve deeper into the dungeon, Roxanne points Michio toward the beasts. He wonders how she knows, so she explains that her sense of smell is highly tuned, even for a wolf type, and she's skilled at tracking targets. She then asks him for a power crystal. Michio asks what that is, so Roxanne explains that they capture a monster's energy after it's beaten and can be used as power sources. However, he can't store energy without the crystal, which means he's been messing up again. When he asks how much they go for, she explains that they're the most prized items they can collect in the labyrinth, making Michio feel dumb, so she tries to comfort him. She then explains that they can purchase blank ones from guilds, so Michio proposes they buy one soon. After Michio finds the creature Roxanne detected and summons his blade to battle it. There, he manages to eliminate it with one strike, impressing Roxanne. They continue through the maze, and when Michio sees Roxanne wagging her tail, he's amazed that this brings her joy. Later, they return to the lodge with sacks packed with twigs. So, Michio informs her it's due to her strength being so remarkable. Roxanne discloses that in her prior group, nobody considered her suggestions and only had her battle subtly from behind. But Michio is unlike them. Michio states her strength is too immense to waste, then instructs her to take a seat next to him. He mentions she doesn't require permission to sit and reassures her he won't pounce on her just because she's nearby. When Roxanne mentions she doesn't care, he embraces her and inquires if he can savor her ears. When she rejects the notion, he compromises by fiddling with them like air bubbles, and Roxanne confesses it feels pleasant. Michio asks Roxanne if they have toasted seaweed-wrapped rice cakes, which is a dish from his birthplace, but Roxanne has no clue what he means. She then states some folks raise fish along the shore, but that's not exactly what he envisioned. Just then, she questions if he'll be heading back to his homeland, so Michio responds he won't be, meaning she's stuck with him. Roxanne clarifies that folks generally trade servants they no longer require, so Michio promises her that he intends on keeping those instruments of massive ruin solely for himself. Nevertheless, he cautions that he's likely to gather more team members, which Roxanne says is perfectly reasonable, though the dummy merely wanted her to approve group shenanigans. Later, they go to the Union and Michio purchases 2 arcane gems. When he hands them to Roxanne, she notes that they alter color based on the arcane force gathered in them. Crimson after eliminating 10 beasts, Violet after eliminating 100, and Ivory after eliminating 1 million. However, most halt at Emerald, which equals 10,000, while some vend at Azure, which equals 100,000. At this, they return to the maze, and when Michio slays the creatures with simplicity, Roxanne recommends they proceed to a taller level. Michio is amazed, as the maze doesn't descend, so Roxanne notes that it ascends because it's evolving like a sentient organism and feeding on the corpses the creatures discard. Michio inquires how they can vanquish the maze, so Roxanne replies he must conquer the Guardian on every level until he climbs to the peak one. Michio realizes he'll require a way to strike numerous foes simultaneously, so he inquires if Roxanne knows any such enchantments, but she doesn't. After they venture deeper through the maze, Michio resolves to rehearse his extra chanting spells to attain the caster profession. However, each attempt to unleash them fails, so he concludes he lacks sufficient MP to invoke them. Just then, Roxanne notifies Michio that was his 10th creature, so he inspects and observes his gem is now crimson. However, Roxanne's gem remains ebony because only the slayer of the final strike gains the arcane force. Instantly, Michio identifies an ability termed Gem Boost, so he activates it with his following strikes, and the next time he reveals Roxanne his gem, it's already Violet. When she questions how it's feasible, he instructs her to keep it confidential. She then mentions emerald gems sell for 10,000 NARs, while golden ones for 100,000 NARs. Since Michio doesn't require currency presently, he opts to disable the boost when he detects a feature to enable group configurations. He elects to explore it, and it reveals all of Roxanne's roles and tiers. Since Beast Fighter is already fantastic, he leaves her unchanged, then inquires if she possesses any recovery abilities or chants. Roxanne explains Monk and Cleric roles can wield those, but to become one, they must overcome beasts barehanded. Michio then instructs her to battle unarmed henceforth, so when the next creature appears, Michio narrowly prevents its strike while Roxanne punches it, but Michio ends it with his blade. However, upon checking his configurations, nothing is altered, so it must not suffice to battle unarmed. He then switches his blade so they can weaken the beast and end it barehanded. However, when he tests the low-tier blade, it's nearly as pathetic as your withdrawal strategy. Roxanne engages and strikes, and Michio is amazed by her agility in avoiding its blows. He then charges in and delivers the last strike, but upon checking stats, still no shift. He views Roxanne's setup and spots the monk roll, so he applauds her excellent performance. In the next encounter, Michio modifies his force stat and tries using his blade again, but obliterates it. However, after tweaking it more rounds, he finally weakens it without slaying it. He then removes his weapons to enhance his might and defeats the beast with a blow. Now that he's attained monk rank, Michio can restore his injuries. He informs Roxanne he swapped role to monk too, but when Roxanne doesn't, grasp how Michio merely tells her to conceal it as well. Later, they head back to the lodge, and Roxanne expresses regret for lacking utility, but Michio reassures her she was helpful. He then starts disrobing her for cleansing time, but Roxanne feels awkward about it since she's a servant, which implies she ought to be scrubbing him instead. Nevertheless, Michio comforts her he isn't objecting. Roxanne reciprocates and strips him, and they resume their nightly exercise session. The following day at the maze, they arrive at a rest space, and Roxanne notes that the Guardian lies beyond the gates. Solely one group may enter the boss's chamber at a time, so if there's multiple groups, they must wait their queue in the chamber. Roxanne is thrilled to battle, but when Michio recalls they'll be confronting a Guardian, he wonders if they're prepared. However, Roxanne reassures him that he is, and the gates swing open to admit them. Roxanne takes point and mentions if fortune favors them, they may retrieve equipment left by a former squad who got wrecked. Suddenly, the Guardian shows up, and Roxanne lunges in to strike, but the boss hardly reacts to her blows. She then grants Michio a chance to hit, but unlike other beasts on the level, it withstands a single strike. Michio then unleashes his burst technique in sync with Roxanne's blows, and they succeed in vanquishing it. Afterward, Roxanne locates a leaf, and when she lifts it, Michio spots a fresh beast strike ability and a new role titled Botanist. Roxanne elaborates that botanists use herbs to craft remedies, so Michio concludes it would be advantageous. But when he inquires about her Beast Strike ability, she clarifies that she's unable to use it because she cannot recite the correct chant. She mentions that casting chants exposes them to danger, so it's smarter for a novice like her to avoid relying on abilities. Next, they proceed to the second floor, which appears similar to the first floor. Michio proposes they return to the first floor and confront the boss again, aiming to obtain the herbalist role too. He then retraces his steps through the door they exited from, but is startled to find himself outside the labyrinth. Abruptly, he recalls Roxanne's note about the waiting room and realizes how foolish he must seem, so he attempts to recover by pretending it was merely a trial. Later, they revisit the boss chamber and Michio feels calm this time. However, when the boss begins activating a magic emblem, he dashes forward to interrupt it, but nearly gets struck in the face. Roxanne rushes to his rescue and restrains the creature, while Michio slips behind it and eliminates it. After Roxanne inquires how the magic emblem vanished, Michio explains that it's another trick of his blade. Next, Michio retrieves the leaf and secures the herbalist role, so he converts the leaf into capsules. When he sees their antidote capsules, he realizes he never considered that beasts could envenom him. Later, they head to the guild where they purchase more capsules to counteract toxins. After paying in total, Michio notes there's still time and recommends they go back into the labyrinth. They arrive on the second floor and spot a level 2 needle beast along with a grotesque caterpillar. Michio targets the walking shrub but eliminates it once again in a single strike while Roxanne handles the caterpillar. Once it's distracted, Michio strikes from the rear and obliterates it, which leaves behind a filament. As they progress, Michio asks if there will be 3 creatures on the third floor as well, but Roxanne responds that only occurs from the 4th floor, then groups of 4 on the 8th floor. Up ahead, they encounter 2 caterpillars, so Michio charges in to attack before they're alerted. After finishing his caterpillar, Roxanne shouts as the second one triggers a magic emblem. However, Michio reacts too late and gets ensnared by filaments as it lunges to strike. Michio halts it with its limbs and slices through it, causing the filaments to dissolve too. After, Michio recommends they prioritize the caterpillars from now on since they're troublesome. Later, Michio and Roxanne stroll through town as Michio ponders what they'd do if they ran into numerous foes. Just then, Michio senses something off and nears Roxanne. He instructs her to discreetly observe the man lurking in the shade and determine what he's eyeing. Roxanne realizes it's the trading shop she once belonged to and wonders what he's doing there, so Michio uses inspect and discovers he's actually a raider. Moments later, they visit Alan and alert him that his firm is under surveillance. However, even though Alan appreciates the heads up, he doesn't appear to take it earnestly. Because of this, Roxanne informs him the observer was a raider, so Alan questions how they discovered that. Michio says he learned some shady stuff while collecting funds for Roxanne, so Alan unveils that the issue is truly tied to Michio. Apparently, the servant Michio sold him was purchased the prior day, but the buyers said they required time to arrange things before collecting him. While Alan conversed with one client, the other whispered something to the servant. He then notes that regular folks have no interest in a rogue's bandana, implying the servant likely had ties to the raiders beforehand. Alan explains that he no longer owns the servant, so he's free to exit his quarters and let the raiders in. Michio asks how he can remain so composed, so Alan assumes it's unlikely that a gang of raiders would storm a trading firm in the town's center, but he also has battle slaves and doesn't plan to be beaten by a band of raiders. At this, Michio tells Roxanne it's time to go since they've done their part, but she tells him about a lady who had been very kind to her during her stay there. When Michio sees she's concerned about her, Michio sits and advises Alan to recruit him as a guard. He claims he doesn't want the servant he sold to cause him any trouble, so Roxanne thanks him for doing this. Alan agrees and promises him 1,000 nars, along with the gear and data cards of any raiders he takes down. Michio agrees, so Alan guides him through a back gate where the Watcher can't see him, and Michio agrees to use it at night too. When they exit, Roxanne apologizes for being self-centered and tells Alan that the man was a raider. So, Michio tells her to be cautious next time. Later, Michio gets ready to depart, but is stunned when he sees Roxanne arm herself too, when she insists on joining, so Michio tells her to maintain a safe distance. After they re-enter Alan's firm and sneak in through the back gate there, they regroup with Alan and his battle slaves. So Alan tells them to remain with him until the raiders strike and snuffs the lamp. While they wait in darkness, Roxanne alerts Michio that the door is ajar. Hearing this, the battle slaves brace themselves, and Alan says he has assembled those unable to fight and those who oversee the slaves on the upper floor. When he requests that Michio shield them, Michio says that was his goal all along, so Alan draws his blade and heads into battle. Shortly after, Michio and Roxanne tread in the darkness, and Roxanne senses someone nearing, so Michio identifies the runner as a level 3 raider. Just then, he guesses the raider likely lacks the courage for a clash and will flee at the first opportunity. Just then, the raider sneaks walks into a chamber, making Michio wonder if he knows he just trapped himself. So Michio tells Roxanne to stay behind and creeps toward the room. Just then, he recalls how he tried chanting his bonus spells randomly, but none functioned due to his limited MP. So he realizes there are still some he hasn't tried yet. On reviewing his unused options, Michio selects the equivalent trade spell and presumes it's meant for exchanging HP. After this, he decides the spell is too risky to test on monsters whose HP he doesn't know. Then pushes the rune door open, gauges the raider's stats, and sees he's a level 3 raider, same as himself. However, since Michio held other roles, he deduced he must have higher HP than the raider. Suddenly, Michio triggers the equivalent trade spell, and it activates in the darkness. Michio then collapses and realizes he just drained a lot of MP. While he questions what he's just done, Roxanne rushes in and asks if he's okay. While he struggles to get on his feet, they sense someone approaching, and it turns out to be Alan, who then asks if he's alright. Alan then points out that one of the bandits fled and headed in their direction. Just then, Alan spots the mess in the room and moves closer to inspect it. Alarmed, Michio fears that Alan will find it strange, but fortunately Alan asks if it's a self-destruction orb. Curious, Roxanne inquired about it, and Alan clarifies that it's a tool that bursts people apart, and he didn't expect the bandits to possess any. Relieved to know Alan didn't deduce it, Michio tries to get up and consumes a pill to regain some of his MP. Afterward, Alan appreciates Michio for his support and hands him his compensation as agreed. So, Michio and Roxanne take their leave. On their route home, Michio chooses to return to the labyrinth as swiftly as possible. Just then, he unlocks a portal and they walk into the labyrinth. Suddenly, Michio collapses and realizes the warp would absorb more of his already reduced MP. While he scolds himself for not noticing this earlier, Roxanne rushes to assist, looking worried. However, a few moments later, Michio slashes through some creatures and recovers completely. After this, he reviews his stats and realizes he made the correct decision, casting the equivalent exchange incantation. Because of this, he's now a level 1 mage who can invoke novice tier spells for fire, water, wind, and earth. After mulling it over, Michio questions Roxanne about the types of spells mages use. In response, Roxanne explains that mages invoke spells that injure all enemies, conjure walls, and fire orbs. Entertained by this, Michio considers all the feasible methods to make it effective. Eventually, when he envisions a fireball, a magic circle appears before him. Having decoded how it functions, Michio unleashes a fireball from his hands. Knowing he's an explorer, Roxanne wonders how he's capable of doing that, but Michio urges her to keep it confidential. Shortly after this, another monster appears, and Michio attempts to eliminate it with the fireball incantation. However, the monster continues moving despite the blaze. Witnessing this, Michio assumes his attack strength will rise as he levels up. Suddenly, he dashes toward the monster and finishes it off with his blade. Just then, the monster vanishes, leaving a twig behind. However, Michio is more eager to explore his new abilities, so he crafts a firewall and realizes it's possibly for protection. After this, he attempts to determine the proper spell for a group target strike. After numerous tries with no outcome, Michio realizes he's drained MP and nothing transpired. He then suspects it's because there are no foes nearby, so he decides that they should proceed to the second floor. When they arrive, they notice two monsters approaching, and Michio thinks it's a chance to test his magic, so he invokes a firestorm, which obliterates the monsters in one strike. After this, Michio decides to mainly employ magic in battles because he wants to safeguard Roxanne since she serves him well with her qualities, which are as gentle as her demeanor. Some moments later, a monster caterpillar ignites from Michio's spell, and when it vanishes, Michio says it would be simpler if his incantations were slightly stronger. Just then, Roxanne discloses that she's heard that mages typically wield staves. Upon hearing this, Michio wonders why he hadn't considered it and remarks that the next market day is in 4 days. He then grumbles that it'll take a while before they can acquire one. However, Roxanne says that he'd need to go to Karatar to visit a permanent vendor. When Michio asks where in the world that is, Roxanne clarifies that there's a vast labyrinth there, along with many outlets catering to explorers. So he decides it's worthwhile to explore. After this, they reach the boss's waiting area, and the boss emerges as a giant insect, so it forms a magic circle and gets ready to strike. However, Michio constructs a firewall that repels the attack. After this, they collectively defeat the insect, and Michio collects a reel of thread left behind by the creature. Next, they proceed to the third floor, where Roxanne sniffs the air and says there's likely a single cobalt up ahead. Unaware of what that is, Michio figures it's a great way to discover what they're like, since there's only one. Just then, Smeagol steps out from the shadows clutching a dagger. Amused by this, Michio activates his magic circle and hurls a fireball at the creature. Within seconds, the cobalt disappears. A astonishing Michio, who had expected more from a level 3 beast. So Michio spots the salt dropped by the monster and picks it up. He then inquires how much it's worth but is disheartened to hear it's as costly as your ex's assurances. So he tosses the salt and embarks on a rampage, slaying more kobolds. Michio then checks his satchel and announces that it's already packed, so he proposes that they retreat for the day. Roxanne then questions his level, and he states he's a level 20 explorer. Hearing this, Roxanne panics, but he instructs her to keep it encrypted as usual. Later, at the guild to collect the day's pay, he hears someone promoting a one-way trip to the Imperial City. When Michio marvels at this, Roxanne clarifies that the woman uses her field walk to shorten journeys that usually span days in exchange for payment. Amused by this, Michio says he would have gone to Kuritar, but he has no errands in the Imperial City. Roxanne then informs him that both cities are adjacent, piquing Michio's interest. So Michio proposes that they travel, but Roxanne says she'll wait for his return since the cost is per individual. So Michio approaches the woman, thinking if he goes there solo, they'll later be able to teleport there freely using the warp. After this, he queries the woman about the trip fee, and she requests a silver coin. The woman then opens a portal, and they arrive on the other side, where Michio is impressed by the magnitude of the Adventurers Guild. However, he asks the woman to transport him to Kuritar, and she agrees. When they arrive on the opposite side, Michio thanks the woman and teleports through a wall back to Bali. Shortly after, Roxanne greets him back, but he collapses into her embrace as he expended more MP than anticipated and tells her that they can now access Kuritar anytime. Sometime later, in the town of Kuritar, Roxanne and Michio explore. While Michio becomes fascinated by the stalls, Roxanne directs him to the labyrinth. On arrival, they witness numerous explorers waiting while others pay to access the labyrinth. Just then, Roxanne whispers in his ear that they could enter by teleporting without paying the charge. Impressed by this, Michio praises Roxanne for being clever. After this, they stroll into a shop where household goods are sold, and a vendor asks if they need something or a place to reside. In reply, Michio inquires if they vend weapons, but the merchant explains that they only sell hardware and describes the weaponry shop. On their way out, Michio asks Roxanne if the store is also a property agency, and she replies by saying she doesn't know what the market is like in Kuritar. When he provides him the summary of rents for different house sizes, Michio understands he's been wasting his funds at the inn, so he inquires if just anyone can lease a home, and Roxanne clarifies that it's feasible if the city is big enough. She then murmurs that he could probably reside anywhere since he has access to incantations. Meanwhile, Michio prefers to conceal his mystical talents from the public, so he opts to live like every other adventurer. Later at the armory, Michio activates his recognition skill and inspects the staffs and scepters on display. To avoid draining his account, Michio chooses a reasonably priced one, while Roxanne praises him for being a wise judge of value. As they peruse the store, Michio is amazed to spot staves crafted from metal, steel, and timber, so he decides to purchase the wooden one so he can promptly resume his back scrubbing practice. Subsequently, on the fringes of the city, Michio and Roxanne discover a peaceful living area beyond the town square and determine it's the ideal spot for a loudmouth like Roxanne. So they return to the supply shop where Michio questioned the vendor if just anyone could dwell in the city. In reply, the trader explains that they could, but their intellect card must be verified. She then inquires if Michio was an adventurer and what type of dwelling he's seeking. Since Michio has no idea about this, he asks about the existing options. The merchant then inquires if they'll both be residing there, and he says they will for the moment, but that might alter later. Hearing this, the vendor grins and applauds him on being an adventurer indeed. Taken aback by her comment, Michio wonders if she recognizes Roxanne as a servant, while the vendor examines Roxanne's floating assets and compliments his taste in ladies too. After questioning Michio about his tastes and realizing he has none, the vendor says she's got some homes close to the labyrinth. To avoid upsetting the locals, Michio says he doesn't mind living further away. After this, the vendor assumes that since he's not a fighter, he prefers a residence made with blocking concrete. When he questions what that is, Roxanne clarifies that warp can't be used on walls built from blocking concrete, so Michio thinks that hinders him from teleporting as he pleases. However, the vendor assures him that he can fit a solid divider. After this, Michio asks to visit the property, and they are brought to the outskirts of the town. There, the vendor states that they could utilize the garden as they wish, but Michio notes that it's quite untended. When they complain about this, the vendor says it's bound to happen without anyone to maintain it. She then recommends that they plant other herbs in the garden. Just then, Roxanne asks for some sprouts, and the vendor complies. After this, the vendor promotes some tubing to them, making Michio suspect she's on a quest to drain his pockets. On entering the house, the vendor explains that they could perform a range of modifications since the prior tenants did a few of them. After presenting them, Michio is stunned to discover that the earlier occupants constructed a bath space apart from the lavatory, so he investigates it and ponders what it's intended for. While Roxanne and the vendor discuss the cooking area, Michio declares that he'd like to check the upper level, so he inspects the chambers and finds the one with the perfect view and size for his midnight exercise routines. He then attempts to teleport to the next room and confirms it works, so when he gets back to the lower level, the vendor asks him for impressions, and he says it's all fine. When they exit the home, the vendor offers the home for 45,000 NARS, and Michio agrees to lease the home. Afterwards, Michio clears the intellect card screening and signs the lease. On their way out, Roxanne mentions she's happy they received a rebate, so Michio thanks her. However, he knows it's only due to his 30% discount ability. Just then, they agree to purchase some assorted supplies the next day. However, since he can't wait to have a bed in the house, Michio proposes that they get the furnishings first. Later, Michio warped into their fresh residence and wouldn't stop rambling about the incoming mattress. Meanwhile, Roxanne panics when she realizes they can do that even though the home was built with blocking concrete. Afterward, at the Bali, Michio draws his wand and says he can't wait to try it. Luckily for him, they encounter a creature insect and he instantly hurls a fireball to destroy it. However, the insect resists perishing, so Michio casts more with his wand and the bug vanishes, leaving a coil of thread. Later that day, at the inn, Michio requests some warm water and a lamp. While he waits, he reminisces on how the room has satisfied him and his passions. Just then, Roxanne joins him and he realizes how relaxed she's become around him. Without delay, he starts to engage Roxanne like an instrument while she makes joyful noises as she reaches lover's heaven for the first time. The next morning, when they get ready to depart, Roxanne reminds Michio how he reaped his returns on her in that room and says she anticipates more of that. Hearing this, Michio struggles to keep his companion calmed and strokes her hair instead. At their new residence, Michio fills the vessels with enough water for Roxanne to scrub. He then chooses to explore the Curator Labyrinth, and there he spots some knights promoting maps of the labyrinth. Amused by their commercial skill, he moves nearer to get a copy. Afterwards, he pays the admission fee and enters to find it's crowded. He then discovers a secluded spot to warp his way back to his apartment. Upon arriving home, he announces that they can now access the Curator Labyrinth without paying. In reply, Roxanne curtsies and greets him, so he plays with her hair and pulls her close. Just then, Roxanne says she's dirty, but Michio doesn't mind, so he decides to seize the moment. Unfortunately, they're interrupted by a knock on the door. Their furniture was delivered, but Michio refuses to let the man in to prevent anyone from teleporting into their crib. After assembling the most essential furniture, Michio decides to go for a test run and pulls Roxanne closer. He then helps her out of her clothes and performs a 50 Shades of Grey all night long on the new bed. The next morning, Michio wakes to Roxanne's kiss as usual, but while he wishes that would last forever, he realizes screwing all day won't pay the bills. To all Leaf Village ninjas. That is it for today. Recap, do not forget to join our clan, our army, my friend. You can do that by clicking that red button below the video, destroy it for me with that bell. To follow us on YouTube with many videos to come in the following days. So see you later, bro. Peace out.